Hey everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and today I'm coming to you with a ton of recommendations for the 2023 Build Your Library Reading Challenge. So if you're not familiar, Build Your Library has been hosting a year-long reading challenge for going on 4 years now, and this year's theme is Adventures in Science and Nature. Every year I come up with 40 prompts and you can do the challenge across the whole year. It's family friendly and I'm very excited to share ideas for the challenge today. So I'm just going to run through each prompt and talk about some book recommendations. I have a huge pile sitting next to me off camera and hopefully this doesn't get too chaotic. The first prompt is to read a book about a scientist. This can be anything as long as there's a scientist involved. So it could be nonfiction, it could be historical fiction, it can be completely fictitious. It doesn't have to be a real scientist as long as the character in the book is a scientist. So some recommendations, I have Alien Echo by Mira Grant. This is a book in the Alien franchise and I believe the sisters are training to be scientists and their parents are scientists. And we have A Bend in the Stars. This is by Rachel Barenbaum and this is about Einstein and other scientists of that time. I have Half-Life by Gillian Cantor. This is a story of Marie Curie and it goes like back and forth between her life as it really was and her life as it might have been had she made different choices. I have Goldilocks, and this is by Laura Lamb, and this is a story about a team of women astronauts and scientists who are traveling through space looking for a new planet to inhabit. The next prompt is to read a book with an animal on the cover. I have The Last Wild by Piers Torday. This is middle grade. I have How to Be a Good Creature and The Good Good Pig. These are both by Cy Montgomery and they both feature animals on the cover. We have Jaws by Peter Benchley and Wish Tree by Catherine Applegate has several animals on the cover. Next is to read a book about a scientific breakthrough. For this prompt you could read The Martian by Andy Weir, you could read Longitude by David Sobel, or you could read A Shot in the Arm by Don Brown. The next prompt is a book set in a forest. You could read The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. You could read Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. You could read A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare. The next prompt is to read a book with an animal protagonist. Again, you could read Winnie the Pooh. You could read Watership Down by Richard Adams. You could read The Traveling Cat Chronicle. The next prompt is to read a book set in space. For this you could read Project Hail Mary. You could read Goldilocks by Laura Lamb. You could read Alien Echo by Mira Grant. You could read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, or really almost anything by Becky Chambers. And you could read 172 Hours on the Moon. This is by Johan Harstad. The next prompt is to read a book about women in science. So for this one, you could read Alien Echo by Mira Grant, Goldilocks by Laura Lamb, Half-Life by Gillian Cantor, A Bend in the Stars by Rachel Barenbaum. You could read Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. You could read Atomic Anna, also by Rachel Barenbaum, The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. All of those feature women in science. The next prompt is to read a book about science gone wrong. So for this you could read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. You could read Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. You could read Recursion by Blake Crouch. You could read The Stand by Stephen King. You could read The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Morena Garcia. All of those would be great options for a book about science gone wrong. Next up is to read a book about sea creatures of any kind. So for that, you could read The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. And you could read The Brilliant Abyss by Helen Scales. This is nonfiction about deep sea creatures. You could also read Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, which is fantasy horror about evil mermaids. For the next prompt, you're going to want to read a book with an insect or a spider or arachnid on the cover. So for that, I can recommend Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. I can also recommend The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. There is a little green beetle here and a little butterfly here, so both insects on the cover. You could also read Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. So all of those are great for insect or arachnid on the cover. Next prompt is to read a book about a dangerous creature. So for that we have Jaws by Peter Benchley, Jurassic Park, again by Michael Crichton. You could read Cujo by Stephen King. So there's lots of great options here. It could be anything with any kind of animal that could be considered dangerous. So wolves, if a book has to do with a bear or a tiger or anything like that, that would work towards this prompt. The next prompt is to read a book that plays with time. So any kind of weird time things happening. Atomic Anna by Rachel Barenbaum. This is a time travel story. I have See You Yesterday by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This story has a time loop going on in it. And I have Yesterday is History by Kosako Jackson, and this is another time travel story. The next prompt is to read a book that is green. For that, I recommend Buried Beneath the Baobab Tree by Adabi Trisha Awabani. The Lost Shtetl by Max Gross. The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Shakshi, Pride and Premeditation by Tirza Price, Free Water by Amina Lukman Dawson, and Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. All of those books feature a lot of green on the cover. The next prompt is to read a book set in a futuristic society. So for that you could read The Giver by Lois Lowry, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. You could read Cog by Greg Van Eekhout. You could read Goldilocks again by Laura Lamb. Alien Echo by Mira Grant. Recursion by Blake Crouch. All of those are set in a futuristic society. Read a book that is cli-fi. This would be any fiction that has to do with climate change. You could read The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. You could read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I have Revelations, Horror Writers for Climate Action. This is a collection of short stories by a variety of horror authors, and all of them are to do with climate change. Next is to read a book set in the wilderness. You could read Hatchet by Gary Paulson. You could read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, which is set in like a wild place where things are very weird. You could read Lord of the Flies. That would be set in the wilderness. Anything to do with a wild location. The next prompt is to read a book with a nature word in the title. You could read Cold Mountain by Charles Fraser. Mountain would count here. You could also argue cold could be a nature word. I have Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Littlebadger. Island of the Sea Women. So island and sea are both nature words, and this is by Lisa C. Wish Tree. Tree is a nature word. How to Be a Good Creature. Creature could be considered a nature word. So the next prompt is to read a book with an element from the periodic table in the title. So like gold. So The Golden Key by Marion Womack would fit here. Silver, like Quicksilver by Neil Stevenson. And I have Copper, The Copper Beach by Maeve Binchy. All of these have an element in the title. Next is to read a book with BIPOC, BIPOC, people in science. So Take My Hand by Dolence Perkins Valdez features a woman who is a nurse. Hidden Figures would be a good book to read here. You could read The Milky Way, an autobiography of our galaxy by Moya McTeer, because it's written by a woman in that field of astrophysics. You could read A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Littlebadger, because this is a story that features, I think the mother is a scientist and also indigenous. And I have Breeding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which would work for this one as well. The next prompt is to read a book that has a tree on the cover. I've probably already held up about a dozen of those. You could read The Lost Shtetl by Max Gross. These are all, I don't know if you can tell, but those are trees. I have The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. Again, hard to tell, but The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden also has trees on the cover. You can kind of see them here in the background. The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid has some trees on the cover. Buried Beneath the Baobab Tree has a tree on the cover. Next is to read a book with space words in the title. Again, I've shown a lot already. The Milky Way An Autobiography of Our Galaxy would count towards this. We have Wishing Upon the Same Stars by Jacquetta Namar Feldman. Starfish by Akemi Don Bowman. Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. I have a lot of star books. Things are just falling all over the place. Oh my gosh, you guys, it is absolute chaos here right now. We're just doing our best. Next up is to read a book set on a farm. Both of these would count for this because Cy Montgomery lives on a farm. This one is about her pig that lives on the farm, and this has stories from her life. It's a memoir told in different animals that she's known through her life. You could also read Charlotte's Web, which is set on a farm. You could read Animal Farm. So lots of different farm-related or farm settings to read from. Next is to read a book that teaches you something new. I don't have anything to recommend here. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be science-related, but because this is a science-themed challenge, you might want to try to find a book that is a science topic that would be something new to you, but it could literally be anything. It's just to read a work of classic science fiction. So you could read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. You could read A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. You could read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. You could read A Canticle for Leibowitz. Like literally anything. Jurassic Park would work here too. I've already mentioned it. That could be considered a classic work of science fiction. So like any science fiction that you think counts as a classic would work here. Is a book with fungi on the cover. This was more challenging to find than I realized, at least in my own personal library. But the one book that I am definitely reading for this prompt and that I've been wanting to read anyway is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which has fungi all over the cover, and it also features fungi in the story. Sorrowland is another book. I can't think of the author, but Sorrowland is another one that has fungi on the cover. Next is to read a book about your favorite science and nature topic. So again, subjective. I don't have any recommendations specifically for you, but if there is a subject matter that you are particularly interested in reading about or learning more about, this is when you would read that for this prompt. So it could be about nature, it could be about hiking, it could be about gardening, it could be about galaxies and constellations and stars and whatever science topic makes you excited and interested to know more, read that for this prompt. Next is a book that features hiking and camping. So for this, I could recommend Wild as the Witch by Rachel Griffin. Lumberjanes would be another great series to read. Both of those feature both camping and hiking in the stories. You could also read A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson for this prompt. The next prompt is to read a book written by an Indigenous author. So you could read The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley. She also has a new book coming out this year. I'm not sure if it's sciencey or not. This one just barely is. Like, there's a science teacher involved in the story. We have Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is the young reader's edition, but you could also read the adult version of that book. And A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Little Badger would work for this prompt as well. The next prompt is to read a book about vaccines. So for this one, you could read A Shot in the Arm by Don Brown. This is a middle grade graphic novel. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which has a lot to do with vaccines. So either of those would work for that prompt. Next is to read a book of nature poetry. This could be any poet, as long as it features a lot of nature. So like Emily Dickinson's poetry would work great here. Robert Frost has a lot of nature poetry. You could do like the National Geographic book of nature poetry. If you're reading them with kids, that would be a great selection. So any poetry that features a lot of nature would work here. Next is to read a book that features flowers or plants on the cover. Pride and Premeditation would work here. There's lots of different kinds of plants and flowers. Free Water would work here. There's a lot of greenery going on in that one. A little more abstract, but On a Night of a Thousand Stars has some like plant things happening. Maud by Melanie J. Fishbane is just a gorgeous book cover. Like, this is so pretty, but this has like a lot of flowers and greenery on it. The next prompt is to read a book about plagues and pandemics. History Smashers, Plagues and Pandemics by Kate Messner. I have And Then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin. This is about like a zombie apocalypse. As Bright as Heaven by Susan Meisner. This is about the flu pandemic in 1918. The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, I believe, is also something to do with the pandemic, the flu pandemic of 1918. Year of Wonders is another plague story. This one is set in 1666 in England. The next prompt is to read a book while either outdoors or sitting in a window looking outdoors. So if it's summertime and you're on vacation, you want to go to the beach, you want to bring a book with you and you read that book on the beach, it counts for this prompt. If it is the dead of winter and you don't want to be outdoors but you want to still see the view of nature and you're sitting in a window and you're reading a book, it counts. So as long as you can see the outdoors while you're reading. Maybe you're going on a hike and you're listening to an audiobook or something like that. Whatever. As long as you read a book while in view of the outdoors, it counts. Next is to read a book that is set at your favorite outdoor destination. So a book set at the beach or set in the mountains or at a lake like Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Anything that's like your favorite outdoorsy place. I don't know, what else could it be? Like a meadow or like anything that you would enjoy. Read a book with that setting. The next prompt is to read a book that was sustainably acquired. So this was Sarah's prompt idea. So basically you just want to read a book that you borrowed from the library or that you purchased secondhand, that you borrowed from a friend. Maybe you read an ebook or something of that nature. So that was something that you acquired sustainably would count for this prompt. Next is to read a book that is set in your favorite season. So like set in the fall would be something like A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I think also The Ghost Tree would count for a fall-themed book. For a winter setting, you might read The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. You could also read Snowblind by Christopher Golden. That would be a good wintry type of read. For spring, I could not think of anything. I don't know if I own a book set, and I'm sure I own a book set in the spring. That's ridiculous. I definitely do. I just don't know specifically of one off the top of my head. So if you know of a spring-themed book, let me know in the comments. And a summary book would be like The Penderwicks by Jean Birdsall, because that's a summer vacation story. So there's lots of summary-themed books, though. So whatever book is set in your favorite season, read that. Next is to read a book featuring a disabled character. For this one, I recommend Air by Monica Rowe, which is about a girl in a wheelchair, and the whole story is focused on her fighting for better accessibility at school and for people to stop treating her like she's helpless. You could read The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones, which features a character dealing with chronic pain. I believe also Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo has a disabled character. One for All by Lily Lainoff features a character with POTS syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So that would be a good option. So there's lots of great books out there for this. So find a book featuring a disabled character. The next is a book about a natural disaster. So for that you could read The Children's Blizzard by Melanie Benjamin, Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer, Ashfall by Mike Mullen, and Dry by Neil and Jared Schusterman. This one's about a drought. This has to do with, I think, the Yellowstone supervolcano erupting. The moon gets knocked off its axis and is too close to Earth, which causes all the things to happen. And blizzard. Next is to read a book about gardens and gardening. So anything, this could be nonfiction, this could be fiction like The Secret Garden. Any book that has to do with gardens and gardening. And finally, the last prompt is to read a book about survival. Honestly, all of these that I just mentioned, Dry, The Children's Blizzard, Life as We Knew It, Ashfall, all of these, while being about natural disasters, are about surviving those disasters. So any of those would work here because all of them are about survival. That is all I have as far as recommendations. I have so many books right now that I have pulled off my shelves. I'm going to have no fun cleaning up after this. But I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope that you will be participating in the Build Your Library Reading Challenge in 2023. I'm very excited about it. I cannot wait to start building my own TBR. My rule going forward, and my rule for all of you, is to make this easiest on yourself as possible. So, if you want to double up your prompts, you can do that. If you want to triple them up, if you want to read 5 books and all those 5 books cover every prompt, you're amazing, and I salute you. If you want to make sure you only read 1 book per prompt, that's fine too. My rule for myself is usually I only allow myself to double up like a few times, so no more than, say, 3 times will I double up. But I might change my mind as we get further into the year, and I'm just like, no, I want to finish this. Whatever works for you, you do that. I'm also making it a rule for myself that every book that I read for this challenge, I either must already own or I have to borrow it from the library. So, like, I'm not purchasing anything new specifically for the challenge. So that is my own personal challenge. You don't have to do that, though. You can do this however you want. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below in the comments if you have any recommendations for any of the prompts I've mentioned today, and let me know too if you're going to be participating this year. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy reading. Bye!